You know, the two-faced nature of Kevin Nash. I haven't done an episode in this series in a long time, but before I get into this series, I must say you have to take this with a grain of salt, whatever that means. And what I mean is, this is Dave Meltzer. Now, I did have a series on this channel a long time ago called The Stupidity of Dave Meltzer. So this is kind of a combo episode. Now, I guess this is up for history and truth, and I guess the people to decide. Is this the two-faced nature of Kevin Nash? Or is this the stupidity of Dave Meltzer? I guess you decide. Now, according to Dave Meltzer, and I say according because in 99, 2000, early 2000s, Dave Meltzer had a radio show, Wrestling Observer Live, which I think they still have now, but who cares? But at the time, it was on a website called IATA. Now, Meltzer and Alvarez, they are many things, but in early 2000s, Wrestling Observer Live was a great show. In 99, from about 99 to about '06, it was a great show. Oh my God, it was great. They were still the same they are now. They were still a-holes and arrogant and pompous, but the show was just great. They talked about current wrestling, past wrestling, great callers. It was funny. It was nonsense. It was a great show. And one thing that would always come up when it had 2000, 2001, when Brian Pillman had been deceased, they would throw a memorial show for Brian Pillman, and the proceeds, I believe they would go to his charity, if I'm not mistaken. I believe they'd go to his family or a charity. Don't quote me on that one. But Kevin Nash was someone who Dave Meltzer constantly would be on Nash for many reasons. The way Meltzer would be on Hogan. And I remember listening to the IATA show and when they were on Sports Byline back then. And Meltzer, well, actually, I didn't listen to it back then. This is years later. I listened to the archives, which you can find online. The show was great, but Meltzer would always say that he was always offended by Kevin Nash because apparently Nash got drunk one time, and Nash was like, "I'm gonna send a donation to Melanie Pillman, on behalf of Brian's passing." And according to Meltzer, Nash never sent any money to the wife or the family. Now, I've never heard a story of Nash and Pillman being close. So this is probably one of those, we're in the biz and you were one of the quote unquote boys. But Meltzer, he stuck by this for years. Nash said he was going to donate to the Pillman Memorial. He never did. So that's another thing that Meltzer always had against Nash. So is Meltzer making that up? Because I've never heard a wrestler ever say that. I've never heard no one say that but Meltzer. Like many people who are into the inside of wrestling, you might have watched many shoot interviews over the years. I've never heard anyone say that Nash said this or he promised this. But Meltzer, for years, would make a point of this. He promised Brian Pillman's family he would donate to them. He never did it. So is that Nash being a two-faced liar? Or is that Meltzer being Dave Meltzer? Leave a comment in the comment section. I guess you decide. But I was reminded of that story when I was going back on these old wrestling sites that, thanks to the internet, you can find archive things. And this is from the summer of 2001, the 2001 Brian Pillman Memorial Show update. And one thing about Pillman's passing, which is something that still surprises me to this day, after he passed, they started doing a yearly memorial show. And Vince McMahon was always the type where he wouldn't let anybody do anything that wasn't benefiting his company. And McMahon allowed WWF wrestlers to appear on the show. And what's interesting, this is the Monday Night War still going on. Not to this point, 2001, but in like 2000, the Monday Night War is still going, and the memorial show for Pillman, it would have ECW guys, WCW guys, and WWF guys. So technically, there were wrestling shows that had WWF, WCW, and ECW all at the same time on the same night in the same building. But most people don't know about this unless you're like really, if you remember reading about this, or you saw the shows, or you went back in history like me. But this was just an article I came across, and it just reminded me of when Meltzer was so like sticking it to Nash about he never donated the money he promised. Apparently Nash got drunk. I don't know if Nash was drunk at a memorial show and he said this, but Meltzer just always told this story. Nash, he said he was going to donate, and another reason why Meltzer was so like I guess offended by this is because in real life Meltzer and Pillman were very close friends. Pillman, I don't want to call the man a mark, but Pillman was one of these wrestlers who, after a Raw taping, after a WCW taping, he would call Meltzer at 3 a.m. and he'd rant and rave, "They're not pushing me. Oh, they're not pushing me." Pillman was one of these people. He would vomit his guts out to Meltzer at 3 a.m. after a TV taping. He was one of them people. But anyway, this article, to go back in history, it's at this point they were still like, I guess, booking the show for the 01 Memorial, and it says William Regal will not take part in the main event of the 01 Brian Pillman Memorial Show. Now that's also interesting because William Regal, a lot of people might not remember this and know this. William Regal, when he was in WCW and when he went to WWF in '98, he did not work. He flamed out of WCW, and it did not work his initial WWF run, in '98 when he had the He's a Man. It did not work because he had a serious drug problem. And I believe, actually, with Regal, I think it might have been drinking and drug problem. I cannot recall. But he definitely had like rehab stints. And his career, he destroyed his own career. He could not stay sober. He was undisciplined. He was a wreck. And what saved his career was he wrestled at one of the Pillman Memorial shows, and people in the WWF heard about his performance. I believe he wrestled Benoit, and that's basically what got him re-signed to WWF in 2000. Plus, he was friends with Triple H. But wrestling at a Pillman Memorial Show actually is what gave Regal his second chance at his career. And then he took that second chance and he did a hell of a job. And, obviously he became the commissioner, and then he had his great run as a heel with the brass knuckles, and then all the way, to where he is now, where most people revere him and they like Regal and things like that. But he saved his career because he got sober and he had a hell of a match on the Pillman Memorial Show. But it says he would not take part in the 01 Memorial Show. Regal was scheduled to take on Chris Benoit, but the match was scratched due to Benoit's recent neck injury, and this is June of 01, so Benoit just broke his neck at King of the Ring. In the match with Benoit, Jericho, and Austin, Benoit broke his neck. So director Les Thatcher, a legendary trainer, Regal and Benoit all agreed that it would be best not to substitute anyone in Benoit's place. Thatcher said their match at 2000 Brian Pillman was an absolute classic and the fans wanted a rematch. So yeah, that was the Pillman show the year before. That's where Regal basically got his career back, was the match he had with Benoit. Also, due to the respect and love both Regal and Benoit share for Brian Pillman, they feel no one could fill Benoit's boots and give the fans as good a match as they did last year. A new main event is expected to be announced within the next few days. Regal is expected to appear at the show in some capacity. Also scheduled to appear at the show is Perry Saturn, Raven, Jerry Lynn, and NWA champion Steve Corino. I forget about that. Steve Corino, he might be an episode of Wasted Potential. Maybe. To me, Corino is someone, to me, it amazed me. How did he not get a chance in WWF? How did he not get a chance in TNA, really? And when I say a chance, like a real chance. Not he did dark matches, not he was there. No, like Steve Corino, he was a good talker. He wasn't like the biggest guy, but he was effective in the ring. Like Steve Corino was a good wrestler. Like he's he's definitely wasted potential. And but Carino, he's one of these people when ECW closed, like he didn't stop. Like he immediately went to the Indies and he was NWA champion by the summer. Um Chris Jericho will not be able to wrestle at this year's show, but will be one of the many guest instructors at the 2001 Mark Curtis Pro Wrestling Fantasy Camp. Mark Curtis is another one. WCW ref. He had passed away. I forget when did Mark Curtis pass? I think he might have passed in like 99, 2000. That was another one that Meltzer was close to. Seats are still available at the show, whatever. But just I came across this article and I just remember Meltzer used to always be on Nash about this memorial thing, and but once again, that's Meltzer's story that he used to always tell. I've never heard Nash talk about this. I don't know if Nash has talked about this on his podcast. I think I've listened to like every Nash shoot interview. I never remember him mentioning Pillman or this incident where he promised to give the wife money. I don't know. Do you believe Meltzer? Do you believe Nash? One of them is one of it is true, one of them is wrong. I don't know. But with that said, I'm up out of here. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to this channel, and that is it.